Daniel Reyes never imagined that a mop and a bucket would one day lead him into the life of the loneliest girl in the tallest tower of the city. Every morning, before the sun even brushed its golden fingers across the skyline, he'd push open the heavy glass doors of the Hollington Empire building, the one that touched the clouds and owned half the city below. To most, he was invisible. The janitor with tired eyes, rough hands, and a faded blue uniform that smelled faintly of soap and sleepless nights. But to his 7-year-old son, Eli, Daniel was a hero, the kind of man who made breakfast with one hand and fixed broken dreams with the other. He had lost everything 3 years ago: his wife, his home, his job, all in the same cruel spiral that life sometimes throws at good people. But Daniel never stopped fighting. Every paycheck went to rent, school supplies, and a second-hand bicycle for Eli. Every prayer was a plea that his boy would never feel the kind of loneliness he once knew. What Daniel didn't know was that fate was about to test the limits of his kindness in the most unexpected way. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of one person to change another's life, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps stories like this alive. The first time he saw her was on a Monday morning that smelled of rain and marble polish. The billionaire's daughter, Aria Hollington, stood in the middle of the 42nd floor corridor, a hurricane in human form. 2 security guards and a private tutor stood helplessly as the 15-year-old hurled a vase against the wall, shattering it into 100 pieces that glittered like tears. I said, "I don't want anyone near me," she shouted, her voice shaking with anger and something far deeper. Grief, perhaps, though no one dared name it. Daniel had come to clean the executive wing, but he froze when her sharp eyes caught his. For a moment there was silence. Then she turned away, muttering something about stupid people who only clean messes they didn't make. He said nothing. He just bent down, picked up the broken shards carefully, and swept the floor clean. When she finally looked back, Daniel wasn't glaring or lecturing. He was just working quietly, humming under his breath the soft tune of an old lullaby his wife used to sing. That sound lingered in the air long after he left. Aria Hollington was infamous. Every nanny, tutor, and assistant hired to look after her had quit within weeks. Some said she was spoiled beyond repair. Others whispered that after her mother's death, she became a ghost haunting her own life, angry, reckless, unreachable. Her father, Alexander Hollington, was a billionaire too busy saving companies to save his daughter. He threw money at her pain, therapy, travel, luxury, but never time. And time was the one thing Aria needed most. Weeks passed before their worlds collided again. Daniel was cleaning the rooftop garden one evening when he heard muffled sobs behind the rose bushes. It was Aria, hugging her knees, mascara running down her face like rain streaking glass. Without a word, Daniel placed his jacket beside her and walked away. The next day, he found the jacket folded neatly on his cleaning cart. A small sticky note attached. "You missed a spot near the fountain." It wasn't an apology, but it was a start. Something shifted after that. Aria began showing up wherever Daniel worked. Sometimes she'd sit in silence, pretending to scroll through her phone while he scrubbed the floors or wiped glass. Sometimes she'd ask strange questions about his son, about why he worked so hard, about whether poor people ever stopped feeling tired. Daniel answered simply, never patronizing, never judging. When she threw tantrums, he didn't react. When she pushed, he didn't fall, and that unshakable calm frustrated her more than any scolding ever could. But secretly, it also fascinated her. One afternoon, Aria found Eli waiting for his father in the lobby. The little boy was doing homework on a janitor's cart, his legs swinging, humming softly. "Are you the janitor's kid?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. Eli just grinned. "Yep. My dad says dirt doesn't mean bad. It just means life happened there." That line stuck with her long after she went back upstairs. That night, she wrote it in her notebook, underlining it twice. The next morning, Daniel was summoned to the top floor, the executive office of Alexander Hollington himself. The man barely looked up from his laptop as Daniel entered. "You're the janitor who's been interacting with my daughter," he said curtly. "I'd like you to stop." Daniel's stomach tightened, but he kept his tone respectful. "Sir, I didn't mean to. I don't care what you meant." Alexander cut him off. "She's delicate, troubled. I pay professionals for that, not janitors." Daniel nodded and left quietly, but when he reached the elevator, he found Aria sitting on the floor, knees pulled to her chest. He fired you, didn't he? She asked. Daniel hesitated. No one can fire kindness, he said softly. Then he walked away. The next day, Arya refused to eat. She locked herself in her room and smashed every mirror. The house staff whispered, the therapist resigned, and Alexander Hollington flew in from Dubai, furious. But nothing worked. For the first time, the billionaire realized that all his power meant nothing in the face of his daughter's pain. Late that night, when the mansion had gone silent, Arya slipped out and went to the only place that ever felt real, the maintenance room in the basement where Daniel kept his tools. When Daniel found her there, curled up beside the mop bucket, she looked smaller than he remembered. You said dirt means life happened, she whispered. Can you help me clean mine? For a moment, Daniel didn't know what to say, but then he sat down beside her, the smell of soap and steel in the air, and said quietly, we all start somewhere. Even roses grow in dirt. From that day on, something extraordinary began. Daniel didn't become her teacher or her therapist. He became her example. He invited her to help him clean, fix, build. He taught her how to change a light bulb, how to scrub marble floors until they shone, how to turn frustration into movement. And for the first time, Arya began to laugh again. Sometimes she'd sneak down to the basement after school, still in her expensive uniform, and help Eli paint broken chairs or plant tiny flowers in old buckets. Slowly, the mansion that once echoed with anger started to hum with small moments of peace. The staff noticed. So did Alexander. One evening, he stood quietly in the doorway of the basement, watching his daughter sweep the floor beside a janitor and his boy. Her laughter was unguarded, her eyes brighter. When Daniel saw him, he froze, unsure whether he'd lose his job again. But Alexander just nodded slowly and left without a word. A month later, Daniel received a letter, an official offer from the Hollington Foundation. Alexander wanted him to lead a mentorship program for underprivileged youth. Inspired by what he had done for Arya, Daniel was stunned. But before he could accept, Arya showed up at his small apartment with Eli's old backpack slung over her shoulder. You taught me to clean, she said softly. Now I want to learn how to build. She had decided to volunteer at community shelters following Daniel's quiet example. The change didn't happen overnight. There were setbacks, outbursts, tears. But there was also laughter, forgiveness, and the slow mending of something long broken. For Alexander, seeing his daughter and a janitor rebuild each other's worlds was a lesson worth more than any deal he'd ever signed. He began spending more time at home learning to listen, to care, to see. Years later, when Arya graduated top of her class and gave a speech about kindness being stronger than privilege, Daniel sat in the back row. Beside Eli, his uniform replaced by a simple suit. When she looked out at the crowd, her eyes found his. And for a brief second, the whole room faded away. Some people clean floors, she said with a trembling smile. But some clean souls. The audience stood and applauded, but Daniel just bowed his head, tears glimmering in his tired eyes. He had done what no one else could, not because he was extraordinary, but because he cared when everyone else had stopped trying. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. It helps us keep bringing real, emotional stories that remind the world kindness still matters. Before you go, tell us in the comments, what do you think is stronger, money or compassion? As the hall emptied, Arya walked up to Daniel and pressed something into his hand, a small silver keychain shaped like a rose. For the man who taught me that even dirt can bloom, she whispered. That night, Daniel walked home with Eli, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. The streets were still dirty, the world still unfair. But somewhere in the tallest tower above them, a girl once lost had found herself because a janitor believed she was worth saving. And that belief, quiet and steadfast, had changed them all forever.